Forget, an Alzheimer's Stories podcast. We're really excited that you're listening today, and we've got a great show for you. We have some stories to share with you from some of our listeners, and later in the show, we're going to share some of our own. If you have an Alzheimer's or dementia story to share, we'd love to hear it. You can email us at whentheyforgetpodcast@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 850-254-9595. You have about 4 minutes to record, so if you get interrupted, just call back and keep going. Some of our listeners have shared Zoom audio recordings and phone voice memo recordings, and those work awesome too. Okay, let's get into the show today. Our first story comes to us from someone very special to me, my daughter. Here is Jensen's story.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jensen, and I am Jennifer, one of the host's daughters. And so Bobby is my Nana. And I have some funny anecdotes to share about her. But I got married at the beginning of 2019 to my husband, Daniel. So my Nana met him, once the Alzheimer's had really started to progress. And sometimes she didn't even know who I was. But whether she remembers his name or not, she always knows who he is. And I remember her telling me how she loved him before I did, and she watched him for weeks, but she decided to let me marry him because he loved me a lot. And we went to see her a few weeks ago and did a little window visit because that's all we can do right now. And she was like, "Where is that guy? Where's that handsome guy?" And then she saw him and she told me again, "I watched him for weeks. I loved him so much." And I just think it's so funny that she remembers him, even though he's like a fairly new person in her life, right? Even though he didn't know her before her Alzheimer's really set in. I just think it's a sweet relationship they have. And that one visit, the last time we saw her, I feel like she didn't, maybe she didn't really know who I was, but she knew, who I was supposed to be, because I think my mom told her that her granddaughter was coming to visit her. But it just always cracks me up. She tells me how much she loved him and how long she watched him, and I love that she has a good positive memories or idea of him in her head, which just makes me laugh. But yeah, there's been a lot of things that's really hard about her Alzheimer's, but it's always good to see her laugh and smile in those moments. So yeah, that's all I wanted to share.
Thanks for sharing that story, Jensen. When Debbie and I first started this podcast, we reached out to a lot of family and friends and people we know in the Alzheimer's community. This next story comes from a dear Instagram friend. Here is Jennifer's story.
When my dad was moved into memory care, I remember feeling just so thankful when I saw his next door neighbor was from the military, just like my dad. My dad was a 20-year veteran of the Air Force. He was in the Vietnam War. It always remained such a huge part of who he was, even after he, started to lose his memories. He never, ever forgot about that part. It actually magnified even more. His neighbor's name was Elijah, and Elijah would wear his hat proudly all the time. And whenever you'd see him, the only thing he would ever say was, "Semper Fi," every time you saw him. One day we were in the shared living room at the care center, and it was really crowded. Elijah walked in, and you could tell he had just fear in his eyes. He was kind of scanning the room, almost like a child looking for, somewhere to sit or some safety. And I said, "Elijah, come sit next to me." And I patted the seat next to me, and he walked over and he sat down, and he looked me right in my eyes, and he said, You know me?" And he just had this look in his eyes where I could tell he just really, really needed me to say, "Yes, Elijah, I know you. Of course I do." And I'll tell you, it was there. It's in him. It's in all of them. They know there's just this moment of clarity that comes up sometimes, right? Where you're lost, something's off, something's wrong. And he knew in that moment, and he was just shocked that I knew him. And I feel like it was just so comforting to him in that moment. And it took everything for me not to cry, just like right now. It was an amazing moment. I'll always remember that.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing that sweet, sweet story with us.
Our final listener story in this episode comes from a repeat contributor named Bill. He shares more about his mother and the reasons he feels her Alzheimer's progressed the way it did. So please welcome again, Bill, to the show.
Many people ask me if we know why my mother Sheila got Alzheimer's disease. Hi again, this is Bill Cohen with another personal story. We most often hear the main factors are genetics and age, which are for the most part beyond our control. However, there is increasing evidence that our environmental and lifestyle choices or behaviors are also contributing risk factors, and my mom is a good example. Mom was only in her early 70s when her symptoms first appeared, and no other family member has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She was generally in good health, with no other diagnosed conditions than slightly elevated cholesterol. So why did she get such a progressive, incurable disease? Here's what me and my family thought. Since in most cases, primary care physicians have little geriatric training and limited ability to diagnose, let alone treat, most forms of dementia. She lived in a polluted area full of toxins and chemicals, the Mississippi Gulf Coast. She used to smoke. She didn't exercise beyond a short walk with her dog. She wouldn't even get in a pool because kids used it. She was isolated a few miles from town and other people. She was my stepfather's caregiver and getting stressed and worn out herself. And as a printmaker for many years, she etched into metal plates and then soaked them in an acid bath. No, any of these probably weren't the reasons why she developed her debilitating illness. But in combination, by not getting the benefits of cardiovascular activity, by eating a lot of fried, polluted food, by her prolonged exposure to metals and chemicals, and with her stress from caregiving, they tipped the scales against her. And then seeing her home for almost 30 years swept away by Hurricane Katrina, it caused her so much trauma her disease accelerated after that loss. She passed away 7 years ago at age 83. As I like to remind people, gut health equals heart health equals brain health. By taking better care of our own health, as well as for our own person living with dementia, we are able to prevent the onset or at least slow the progression. And remember, we are all doing the best we can. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing, Bill. Bill is a caregiving support consultant and has a ton of great information and help for caregivers. I've put the links to Bill's Facebook group in the show notes, and I've also put a link to his website where you can find out more about the caregiver support groups he runs. Before my sister and I tell some stories about Mom, we wanted to take a minute and talk to you about how you can share your Alzheimer's or dementia story with us. We have a voicemail line you can call. That number is 850-254-9595. You have about 4 minutes to record, so if you get interrupted, just call back and keep going. You can also record your story on your cell phone and email that to us. Our email is whentheyforgetpodcast@gmail.com. We've even had people record the audio using Zoom or their webcam and email that to us. Finally, if you don't want to send us a recording, you can email us your story and we'll read it on the show. All right, now let's get back to the episode. We're gonna take a few minutes and talk about. We're probably gonna take more than a few minutes.
More than a few minutes.
and talk about some of the medicines that Mom has been on over the course of her Alzheimer's from when she was diagnosed in 2013 to now. And so we have a little disclaimer because we're going to mention a bunch of names of medicines, but we want to give a little disclaimer. So go ahead. You go ahead and do that.
The disclaimer is that we don't want to scare anyone away or discourage anyone from using a specific medication just because we have mentioned it today and that our mom had a reaction to it. Everyone's body chemistry is different. Everyone's brain chemistry is different. There are certain medications that work beautifully for one person that don't work at all for another person. So our purpose today is just to help you prepare for the fact that some medications are going to work very well and some medications are going to not work well at all, and some are going to, make things worse. And it's just a matter of something you need to prepare for, but we don't want to discourage anyone from using a specific medication that we talk about today. We just want to share our story of our mother's specific reactions to medication.
Yeah. In particular, a really funny series of events that happened.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. When she was on a particular medication.
Yes. That could also be construed as an LSD acid trip.
Yes. Yeah, she definitely took one of those.
She did.
Long-term 2-week acid trip.
Oh, poor. I felt so bad for her.
I know. Me too. All right. So what I remember of it is Mom has suffered from depression, and I think anybody who has Alzheimer's feels a measure of depression going in and out of memories. And so she was really struggling with her mood, and they took her off the Prozac that she'd been on for years, and they put her on a medicine called Remeron that is, just for generalized anxiety and depression. And Mom was probably on it, I would guess, for a week or so as it started to kick in. And then I remember I got a call from her place, and this is when she was in assisted living, and they said, something's wrong with your mom. She's having a bad reaction. She had stood up in the lunchroom, if I remember right, and started yelling at people about the tables and the walls and what is going on here. And then she felt like the floor, like she said, the floor disappeared. So then she ended up on the floor because she didn't know what else to do with herself. So they took her to the hospital, and she was in the ER, and I showed up over there. And when I show up and doctors start asking questions, I end up speaking a lot for her and try not to talk about her like she's not in the room. This doctor was a really nice man. He was very short. I will say that, and that comes into play with the hallucinations with Mom. He was very short, and he was bald, and she really giggled. She giggled a lot at him. When the paramedics showed up to pick her up, one of them told me at the hospital when I got there that she said that he was the most handsome man she'd ever seen in the world. And then he asked her if she did drugs. He said, have you done any marijuana? Have you eaten any mushrooms? He started asking her these questions, and she told him her mushroom joke, which is, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, but something about, you tell it.
It's I don't like to eat fungi, but I'd like to date one.
Yeah, there we go. And he thought she was a kick in the pants. I mean, the paramedics thought she was hilarious. So I get to the hospital, and she's rambling about all kinds of stuff. And she was talking about how she got to the hospital on her bed, driving her bed down the freeway with the jetpack behind it. That one was super funny. She was adamant that she was on the freeway and that a jetpack got her to the hospital. And then she kept talking about being across the bridge in Washington at a horse farm, buying horses, and that she needed to buy the horses. And then later that story turned into something about the farmers chasing her with a pitchfork and stabbing her in the bum with a pitchfork and lifting her up in the air. Oh, and so they did a whole bunch of tests that first day, and I went over the medicines that she was on, and the doctor said there was nothing wrong, and she seemed much calmer, and I'm almost certain they had given her some Valium or something like that. And then she was in the hospital for 8 hours, and we drove her home, and they had a nurse at her facility that was essentially supposed to do hourly checks on her. And so the next morning, my husband and I woke up, and I called in, and she was fine and sleeping soundly. So we decided to take a drive out to the beach and just drive to some antique shops. And that is pretty much where we were when we got the second call that she had gotten up and the walls were melting and the floor was disappearing, and she just had a whole other freak out. And they took her straight back to the hospital with the same doctor, and the same doctor was in the ER. And then I think the other notable thing at the hospital the second time was she really had a tough time with that doctor. She kept calling him a gnome. And he would walk by. He was just a hardworking ER doctor, but he was very short, and he would walk by the room, and because it's a glass room, she could see him, and she would giggle and laugh and say things like, "Look, there goes the gnome." And he said to me, "Your mom remembers me from yesterday. It doesn't really seem like she has Alzheimer's." And I had to tell him she has Alzheimer's from a traumatic brain injury. It doesn't work the same. Her memories aren't the same, and her memory loss isn't the same as traditional Alzheimer's. She spent a lot of time that day in the hospital too. Oh, I took some video of her. She was still talking about the horse farm, and she was talking about the farmers chasing her around. There were some other things. She also took the blankets, and I sent you video of this. She pulled them up over her head, and she tucked her little face inside there so that all that was showing were her eyes and her nose and part of her mouth. Like she cocooned herself in the blankets. Oh, she was tripping out. And
it was a serious trip.
Oh my goodness. And so, she spent 8 hours or so in the ER that day, and they gave her some more medicine to calm her down. They did another CAT scan. They did all this stuff to make sure she was okay. And they sent her back and, of course, took her off the Remeron, and her doctor was going to meet with her and put her on something different. And so then you talked to her on the phone.
I did. And what I remembered first with her first trip to the
trip.
her first trip to the ER is I've always been very good about keeping me in the loop when things like this happen, like if mom falls or if she has to go to the ER, or all of that. And I just remember getting a text that said, "Mom's being transported to the hospital. There was an incident at her place." And you didn't know any more than that either at that point. You just knew she was going to the hospital, and you said, "I will tell you more once I get there." So, a lot of times what you did when she would be transported to the hospital for this or that, you would let me talk to her. Well, I remember, I didn't hear anything for a while, and I'm just kind of sitting here going, okay, what's going on? And then you and I have a text conversation, and, you said you can't talk to her. She's completely out of it. She's incoherent. She's loopy. She's not making any sense. And so I was like, all right. So you sent me the photo of her wrapped up in the blankets. And yes. I really feel strongly that we should use that photo for this podcast.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Because it's such an adorable little photo. I mean, she looks like a little nun or a little kid. Like, how little kids wrap up in their blankets, and she just is all wrapped up in her blanket. And I couldn't talk to her. I just was getting information from you, and we knew it was a medication reaction. Something was going on. I was very relieved when she was sent home after 8 hours, and we got the word that she was resting comfortably and nothing was wrong. That she seemed to be okay. And then, you went out of town, and then all of a sudden, relieved, and I get another call. Mom's going back to the hospital. And I was like, oh my Lord, what is going on with this woman?
Yeah.
And I was very concerned. What I remember, and this might be a different incident, but what I remembered is that she got violent with someone in the cafeteria.
Yes.
And this place, this assisted living place, is not like a memory care. They're not equipped to handle violent residents. And so every time Mom got violent or had an outburst, their only response was to send her to the hospital to be medically restrained, essentially. And so what I remember about it, and I might be remembering it incorrectly, but I'm almost positive the second time she had gotten in a violent altercation with someone.
Yeah.
And so they sent her back to the hospital because they couldn't deal with the violence, and they were talking about moving her into the psychiatric ward.
They were, yeah.
Because they didn't know. They didn't know what was going on with her. She was really having a psychotic break. She was not in a reality at all. So they were going to put her in the psychiatric ward, and I know they medically restrained her, which, you gotta balance the idea between physical restraint and medical restraint.
Yeah.
And sometimes medical restraint is a much more humane way to go than physically restraining her.
Yeah.
And so I understood why they did that. But when she got home, I was finally able to have a conversation with her. And what is interesting about her psychotic break is she had the same psychotic break with me that she had with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking to her on the phone, and she is telling me about the jetpack and, riding her bed to the ER. She told me she did not know where she was, but she believed she was in Washington at a horse auction.
Yeah.
And she knew she wasn't there. At that point, she was coming off her medication enough that she knew she wasn't there, but she told me, she said, Deb, I was terrified because I didn't know where I was. I thought I was in Washington at a horse auction, and I had to buy the horses, and I didn't know how to buy the horses. And I kind of just went along with the whole thing because sometimes, when you argue or you say, no, Mom, you're in Beaverton, Oregon, and then assisted living, and you have Alzheimer's, that's just going to mess them up even more. So I kind of went along, and I said, what kind of horses did you buy? I said, my favorite kind of horse is, the brown quarter horse. And we were talking about Clydesdales and all different kinds of horses. And then she told me that the floor kept falling off, falling away from her. And, so then she would fall down to the floor to feel that it was still there because she felt like it was falling away.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because all of her memories of this psychotic break were still there.
Mm-hmm.
And she recounted all of that with me. And I just went along with it, and I tried to comfort her, and I tried to let her know, you're okay, everything's fine, you're not in Washington anymore, you're back where you belong, the horses are okay.
Yeah.
The floor is there.
Yep.
All of that, I tried to make her laugh a little bit and I tried to kind of bring her back just talking to her on the phone. Then you did research on the medication she was on.
I did.
I did research on the medication she was on, and we both figured out the same thing. That this reaction isn't super common, but it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
For people to react like this, especially when you are mixing medications.
Yeah. Yeah, because she was still on her regular Alzheimer's meds the Aricept and the memantine at the time. She's no longer on either one of those two, but she was still on those, and so they took her off the antidepressant and put her on Remeron because her mood was just very down for a long period of time. So it took her almost 2 weeks to feel herself.
Oh yeah, long time. I came to visit her shortly after all of that happened, and she was visibly shaken by the experience because she still remembered it, and there were still times where she kind of went back to that place. I mean, she knew where she was at that point, but she was still very shaken by the whole experience. I can't imagine. I mean, there's been times where, when I was younger, I'd get a fever and I'd get delirious, and I wouldn't know where I was and that sort of thing. I have never done acid, but I can imagine how terrifying that would have been. I mean, we laugh about it now, and she would laugh about it too if she was lucid enough to remember. She would think it was just a hoot. And especially the pitchfork. Yeah. People chasing her with pitchforks and lifting her up and pitchforking her in her bum and all of that. She would just think that was hysterical and funny, and it's something that we laugh about now, but I can imagine. You have those moments. I mean, I'm an educator, so are you, and I've had dreams like before a course was about to start that I was going to the classroom and I got up and I had no idea what I was teaching. Yeah. So she's having a hallucination. She's at a horse auction. It's her responsibility to buy horses, and she doesn't know how to do it. She doesn't know what kind of horses she should get and all of that. And so I can imagine that it was very terrifying for her. Yeah. And, I understand these medications. I mean, the truth of the matter, and you know a little bit more about Alzheimer's meds than I do, but the truth of the matter is there's no cure for Alzheimer's right now. They manage symptoms with different medication cocktails, but the research and the medications for Alzheimer's is a very new science. Yeah. And everything is to manage symptoms. Nothing reverses it. Nothing stops it. Yeah. But you're willing to try these medications. We would have done anything at that point to keep our mom with us for a little bit longer and to keep her in assisted living. And, when she goes into those moments where, she's got the 1,000-yard stare and she doesn't know who we are. I mean, you long for a pill that you can give to your loved one to bring them back to you. Yeah. But there isn't one. Nope. There isn't one. And, the best that you can hope for is to manage symptoms, to keep it at bay as long as possible. But some of the medications are going to do things. Yeah. I mean, she's had other reactions. She's had medication that made her fill up with water. Yeah. And she looked super pudgy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Her ankles, her hands, her face had a funny color and looked stretched out almost. And then there was the medication that made her have her stomach pain and bladder pain. So then they kept sending her to the hospital for bladder infections. And she went to the hospital 3 or 4 times for bladder infections because that's just how they do it. You're at assisted living or memory care, something goes wrong, we're going to take you to the hospital because that's all they can do for them. And she went in and had all these bladder infections, and that was a reaction to, it was called Exelon. And there's a generic name for it that's rigolantamine or something. I actually ended up calling it rigor mortis, the medicine, because that's how I could remember. It's just terrible. But Mom used to call her medicine that she took for her migraines Rizzles, remember? I do remember that because she couldn't remember the name of it. So we always called it Rizzles the whole time we were growing up. Did you take your Rizzles? Did you take your Rizzles? I totally remember that. And so when I can't pronounce medications, I make up names for them now like Mom did. So I called this medicine rigor mortis.
And I said that to the doctor, and I said, I don't know the name of the medicine, but it sounds like rigor mortis. And she just laughed. She totally knew what I was talking about. But that medicine made Mom have all of these feelings of having a bladder infection. But she didn't actually have a bladder infection because they kept testing her over and over again. And they were giving her antibiotics for a bladder infection that she didn't have. So eventually what we had to do there was cut that dose down by a quarter of what it was. And she's still on Exelon. And then they added another one, galantamine, something like that. I'm not sure how to say it. But she's on those two now, which are medications for more later stage Alzheimer's. And then they have her on that antipsychotic because her anger outbursts used to be very severe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember the one medication, and I think it might be the galantamine. I'm saying it wrong. It's the Galapagos one.
Yes.
I think when she first went on, it was one of those. I think it brought her out of whatever, her Alzheimer's haze.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when we had the moment, and it didn't last for very long. I remember it was a couple of weeks where she was incredibly angry. That was when she threatened to kill herself.
Yeah.
That was the necklaces.
Yeah.
And that was Bobby. That was our mom. That was Bobby saying, this is not acceptable. I don't want to live like this.
Yeah.
And we really believe that for that short, brief amount of time, our mom came out of it for just long enough to express how angry she was at the reality. And I was almost grateful. So I go back to that statement I made earlier that you would take any medication, you would give your loved one any pill to bring them back to you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you bring them back to you, if the medication does bring them back to you, they realize where they're at.
Yeah.
They realize what's going on. And that's when you're going to get the true, authentic reaction to the Alzheimer's. And that was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That was not this past April, but the April before. That was an absolutely heartbreaking time for us because we knew that our mother was telling us, I don't want this.
Yep.
And we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
She's too far gone now. And it's almost a blessing that phase didn't last very long, that medication was not effective for very long. And she went back into her Alzheimer's haze.
Yeah.
And she's not aware.
Yeah. She is not aware at all that she even has Alzheimer's. She was so far gone when she was diagnosed that she has never acknowledged or recognized that she has Alzheimer's.
No.
Yeah, I remember that. We had the meeting because we had just moved her into memory care, and she was so angry and so violent, ramming her walker into the nurse, ramming her walker into people. She tried to break out and actually got herself, when somebody else was being taken out in an ambulance, got herself out the front door and went out into the parking lot and started screaming. They wanted to kick her out of there.
Yeah,
and thank goodness she has a wonderful case manager, and you and I were both there, and we had the meeting. I mean, we did agree to put her on an antipsychotic, which had its own slew of side effects, but the swelling and then the zombie-like, she was a zombie for a little while.
Yeah,
she just stared and didn't say anything. But she did eventually work her way through her reaction to that medicine, and now she still gets angry, but she's more even. It's more even.
And she used to sit right by the front door and wait. She would wait for somebody to come in, and she was out the door.
Yeah.
And I was like, Ma, where are you gonna go?
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
But I can just see her just booking it.
Yep.
down that parking lot. She was gone.
Yeah.
And there was a couple times that she pushed you and hit you to get out the door.
Yep.
And she's done it to me. And I mean, that's for everyone who, for those people who are listening that know our mom from when she was younger and very feisty, that's Bobby.
Yeah.
That's the authentic Bobby.
Yeah.
Is the one that's like, you're not going to keep me here.
Yep.
And, she grits her teeth and, purses her lips, and she's gone. And, I mean, the woman is slow, right? Most of the time. But open that door, give her a chance at freedom, and she's like, I mean, she's the speed walking champion of America.
Yeah. Yeah, she was out of there like a bat out of hell.
She was. She doesn't even try anymore.
No.
But
yeah,
at the same time, and that, it's sad, but at the same time, that's actually a blessing that she's not aware.
Yeah. Yeah. They moved the chairs from the lobby because she sat there on those chairs hawking that door. And then I come in one day and there's no chairs. And I talked to one of the med aides and they're like, yeah, we had to move those. So they put the chairs away for a while. They've actually brought them back out now. But because we saw them when we video chatted with Mom the other day, they had the chairs in the lobby again, but they had to take them out.
I saw that.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, those are good stories.
They are very good stories, and it's good that we can laugh. We'll never make light of our mom's disease, but at the same time, we as a family have always laughed.
Yeah.
Because if we don't laugh, we're going to just break down and melt down and cry.
Yep.
And so we have to keep each other happy. And that's, what we do when we go see Mom now is the best way to help her is to tell her a joke and make her laugh. We were at the window a couple weeks ago and we were talking about the Hallmark movie, How to Train Your Husband. And we were making jokes about it. And she was like, oh, maybe I should watch that. And you looked at it and you said, well, you need to get a husband.
Yep.
And she looked at you and she just cracked up.
Yeah.
So
yep. Yeah.
We're not, we never would make light of anything, but at the same time, we have to laugh.
Yeah.
We have to joke. We have to find the happiness and the humor in the moments.
Yeah. Let's change the subject for 1 minute and talk about our ratings, because a couple people rated us on iTunes.
Yay!
So exciting. We got some 5-star ratings.
People like us.
People like us. It might just be our friends that like us, but people like us.
Well, who did we pay?
Yeah.
Did we pay anyone?
Yeah, we must have.
Yeah. If I didn't know any better, I would say Mom is liking us.
Yeah. Because
she was always our biggest fan.
Yep, she was.
But yay, I'm glad we have some ratings. I hope more people would go and do that. With this whole Alzheimer's thing, I know that this year we're doing the walk.
Mm-hmm.
And what I said on our Facebook page rings very true, is that, we understand that right now, with the world the way it is, everyone needs to look out for their finances. So we're not asking for any donations this year. But the one thing that everybody can do for us that is completely free is to like our podcast, rate our podcast, share it with your friends, ask them to share it with their friends, and just, get the word out there. We would love to hear other people's stories.
We would.
You and I share a lot, but at the same time, we would love to hear stories about other people's memories and situations and things that they have gone through, their experiences with Alzheimer's, good or bad.
Yep.
We would love to hear those.
Yes, we would. And that's our episode, everyone. Thank you for listening to our show. When they forget, we remember. So please keep calling in and sharing your stories.